Hello and welcome back to the Simplifiers podcast, where we take topics in business and in life and simplify them. And friends, I'm so pleased to say we are in the last week of 2020. You've done it. Well done. My goodness, this year was a doozy. And now we're in that in-between where the holidays have just finished and New Year's is just around the corner, where we get to reflect on the year ahead. And that's the topic I'd like to simplify today. So I'm bringing back a guest favorite that was on the podcast earlier this year in July, actually episode 128, How to Thrive in a Crisis Situation. Her name is Maggie Craddock, and she's the president and CEO of Workplace Relationships. She's a veteran executive coach known for her work with Fortune 500 CEOs and senior management. Now, you've probably heard her on NPR, ABC, CNBC, as well as seen her written up in Harvard Business Review and the Oprah magazine. She's received her Master's of Economics from the London School of Economics, and her latest book is Lifeboat, Navigating Unexpected Career Change and Disruption. So I'd like to welcome back to the Simplifiers podcast, Maggie Craddock. Hey, Maggie.
Hey, Mary, I'm so delighted to be with you.
Oh, I'm so pleased you're here, and I'm so pleased that it's you that I get to have this conversation with, because I feel like this whole month, the last few episodes, we've been talking various aspects of how to plan for the year ahead, given the year that we just all endured and, for some of us have come out on top, right? It was a crazy year. How about it for you, huh?
It was an absolutely crazy year, although some wonderful things happened as well.
Yes.
I think we have to take full balance of it. We've really learned to appreciate a lot of things that we've done without and things that we want to look forward to. So I think, like a lot of your listeners, I've learned a lot about myself this year.
Yes.
But as I look back over the course of the year, one lesson I've learned is I've learned to take it easy with my expectations of myself. I really have. I've known so many remarkable women and men who've been running businesses, managing families, homeschooling, creating all these strategic ideas and plans. And I think one of the things we've all learned when the unexpected strikes is we really have to be thoughtful of the expectations that others put on us.
Yes.
And also the expectations we put on ourselves. We've got to give ourselves a break in the midst of all of this. And I think that's really absolutely critical to setting ourselves up for success in the year ahead.
Incredibly important and well placed as well, right at the beginning, because I think that especially for entrepreneurs, I can speak for myself. I've been running this business for 17 years now. You just want to do all the things. You want to do them all now. Not now, yesterday. I want to achieve and create and serve and help. And there's so much drive and passion behind what we do that we get caught up in it. And when, a year like 2020 comes along and so much has been stripped away from us, it's hard to continue to be that person when you feel like you're working, with your arms tied behind your back, your kids in the other room homeschooling, and, all things are out the window, right?
Well, when we started this whole adventure, and everything just started falling apart at once in so many levels. What's going on in the business environment, what's going on in our families, our health, the geopolitical situation. I think an awful lot of us rose to the occasion and thought, well, here we go, right? I can handle myself in an emergency. But in our minds, that idea of an emergency, it had a shorter time frame. And this has not been a sprint. No. This has been a distance run, right? So I'm saying to people all the time, clearly, in business especially, the conversations we have with other people are very critical. Yeah. Whether we're hiring new people, mentoring people, setting ourselves up for an important interview with a job or a client or what have you. But what it's come down to when this has been going on for so long is it's vital to be conscious of the conversations we have with ourselves, right? Are we as supportive and patient and kind to ourselves as we are to others in our families, in our businesses, and in our communities? And I think it's really important to center on that as we go forward.
Yes, and words matter. It reminds me of a recent conversation I had with Michael Gelb talking about like mastering public speaking. Words matter. The words you use to describe yourself as a public speaker, as a communicator, or a leader in your organization, but then also the words that you use in your presentations, whether it's talking from stage or on a Zoom call or motivating your team or otherwise. I can't agree more.
Words matter and tone matters,
Yeah.
and the emotional state we're in matters. And it's interesting because as I go into each new year, and Mary, this, I create something I call my life worth living list, right? As I go into the year and think about what happened in the past year and what are my goals in the next year. And of course, we all have goals for our businesses, our goals that are related to other people. But I always have those internal goals that go to, what's going on in my inner state. So as I look back on 2020 and I thought about this conversation, one of those goals was be the kind of person that other people feel better about themselves after they've been in contact with me. But what 2020 has taught me is, am I doing that for myself?
Yeah.
When it's 2 o'clock in the morning and I'm worried, or when somebody rushes in and interrupts me, particularly a member of my family, a child, right, rushes in and interrupts me, and I've lost an important document, or I can't put something together under time pressure, how am I reacting to them? But also, what's going on with me?
Yeah.
Am I patient? Am I centered? Am I objective with myself? Or is that harsh voice barking orders in my head? Our ability to be kind, senatorial, strategic, supportive of other people stems from our relationship to do it with ourselves. And boy, have we got an opportunity to learn that in 2020 and take it forward.
I really appreciate that reminder. It's funny. I mean, you're an executive coach, so you talk to people and you teach and help mentor people to mentor their teams and staff. Like you would never be like that to your sales manager, to your middle management team. You would just never speak to those people to get them to produce the numbers they want to hit or motivate them to expand or lead their own teams. Why do we do it to ourselves?
Well, we're learning. I think we all have, you mentioned Lifeboat, and I talk a lot about how everybody has their inner iceberg in Lifeboat. Those inner things that we're most concerned about, we need the most validation around. We have to be patient with ourselves around some of these emotional triggers. Yeah. But when challenge strikes, there's so many people that are wonderful with their teams, with their staff, with their clients going out and they're like, we've got this. Let's do this. But let's say it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you're waking up not knowing what's going on with the state of the health in our nation, not knowing what's going on with the state of our nation at all. Right. And you're feeling a sense of responsibility for taking care of others. And I think so many of us do, right? And one of the goals I've really been working on, and it's been helpful, is to understand, to sort of almost coach myself that way. Yeah. And understand how important those simple moments are when we realize what we can do that's positive and constructive in terms of our relationships with ourselves, and where we can't. Getting up in the middle of the night and being like, you know what, that's okay. Yeah. It's okay if I can't sleep. It's going to be okay. We'll figure out, right, how to enjoy this hour, right, how to read a book, how to sit and listen to some music. It's all going to be fine. And we've learned so much about our relationships with ourselves that we want to be able to take forward when we get that wonderful experience of opening up again.
Bottom line, it's not self-care is sort of, that's a nice thing. I should do that. It's a critical must-have, necessary thing in order to navigate uncertainty, navigate the times we're in. And I think that it ripples out. I mean, it's so common sense for so many of us, and myself included, and we forget it. But when we take good care of ourselves, even if it's in the micro moments of just drinking enough water or going to bed at a reasonable hour, or, just having that space to process and a little bit of grace to, give yourself in tricky situations, you make better choices the next day. You're well rested. You're well hydrated. Those things ripple out, and those 1,000 daily choices you make, either personally or professionally, make up a lifetime, make up a career.
Well, and with really talented, intelligent, motivated people, one of the things I come back to, Mary, is, we both have a lot of exercises and ideas that we lead clients through and things
Yeah.
we want them to be thinking about and strategic choices. But I'm always reminding them, stop, pause and take a minute, because this work isn't going to work if you're doing it from a false self. If you're answering questions based on who other people expect you to be, if you want to sound good, or something in the back of your mind has a lot of shoulds in it. I should be looking at it this way. I should be thinking about it that way. So many of our norms have just been rent asunder in this year.
Yeah.
That the gift we're given, right, is it's okay to feel. It's okay to be disappointed, exhausted, a little resentful, whatever you are. Accept that, own it, and don't let it capsize you. And when you're in these strategic dialogues, those conversations you're having with yourself, or you're going through priorities, stop and make sure that you're doing them authentically from how you really feel, not based on someone else's idea of who you should be. I mean, that's really the difference between career planning, which we all have to do for ourselves more and more, and career development, which is a wonderful thing too, but that's scripted in sync with the needs of an organization or an industry.
So smart.
Career planning gets a lot wider, right?
Yeah. So I suppose in efforts to plan for the year ahead, I think we first have to take a step to reflect on the year that's happened, right? And got any tips there on how to really do that, looking back to better equip us for the year ahead?
Oh, absolutely. I think for me and for many of my clients, it's valuable to just reflect on two really simple questions, which is, what is most important in your life right now?
Yeah.
And are you living your life in a way that reflects these priorities?
Yes.
Very important to just, when we're dealing with something complicated, like what's the future of my business, my career, all these industries, let's get simple before we get too complicated with it, right? Yeah. How am I investing my time and energy? And this changes, right? This changes every single year as the world is changing, we're changing, the business landscape is changing. You got to go back to those priorities. What matters to me the most right now? And is the way I'm investing my time and energy, those precious moments of my life, because if there's one thing 2020 has taught us, it's that life is not infinite. Make the most of it.
Yeah.
And are you investing your time and energy, and we know those complement each other, in a way that reflects what's most important to you?
Yeah.
And if not, why not? We've got to take a look at that, right?
Yeah, and how I hear that is your life, is your business in alignment with your core values? And, it's so interesting that you put it in that kind of a slightly different framework. It opens something new in my brain. And, thinking about, how long we tend to let things slip, or we just sort of endure a difficult situation and then make decisions, big and small, that are not in alignment of our core values. And, how long we perpetuate that over and over. It's like, oh, I'll deal with that next week, or oh, I'll figure that out next month, or and we sort of plug the little lifeboat with some chewing gum and go, yeah, it'll be fine. Don't worry.
Well, I mean, we talk in Lifeboat about the contrast between the priorities many of us have internalized around being who other people want us to be, who other people need us to be, over delivering and performing according to the expectations that have been set by our industry, by our colleagues, by family members, what those expectations are. And then how, just as you're saying, Mary, we come back to what I call the lifeboat mindset, which is, when you're dealing with situations where you have more questions than answers, you're not going to think yourself through it. There's all sorts of ways to train yourself to make sure that you stay aligned in terms of your thoughts, which can just really get creative when you're under stress, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Your feelings, right? So that you're in touch with them, you're not suppressing them, but they're not taking you under, right? And your intention, so that that alignment helps you pull through. And then, of course, another thing I talk about a lot is I don't think it's all the decisions we're making, because sometimes we put so much pressure on ourselves to get it right, whatever that is, right? And when everything's changing, I think what's vital is that we have confidence in our decision-making process. Because the way that we sort of internalize the lessons that matter to us and understand how we're going to reprioritize authentically and how new opportunities or situations fit into all of that, right?
Yeah.
And invites us to constantly come back to that alignment, because we want a decision-making process that's going to withstand the need to go through all the new choices that we're facing, all those things. That's why, sometimes I reflect, I think a lot of my methodology, and the methodology in Lifeboat, I think reflects this too, stems from the fact that before, like you and like many of your listeners, I was, self-employed, running my own business. I spent a great deal of time as a portfolio manager on a trading floor, dealing with people who were making big, high-stakes decisions with other people's money. And we really had to understand a discipline around our decision-making process. And I think your readers will also resonate with the fact that when you're looking at any kind of investment, including the investments you make with your time and energy in your career, you want that diversification. You want to look at a spectrum of things that you might be investing in. You want a different way to look at sort of what I call a risk spectrum of the things that you're entertaining in your business, in your career, in your life choices, right? And so that risk spectrum professionally, I always kind of align with, the risk spectrum of any investment portfolio. What's the most conservative thing you can do? What you've always done, versus how we identify all the different spots on that risk spectrum until we get all the way to something you might not have even considered before, which could unfold as well. But there's many things that could happen, and you want to be prepared for how much risk you can take, depending upon the opportunity that presents itself, and how that's going to come back to your core decision-making discipline when new information comes in and can change. Right?
So it sounds like to me when you say that, it makes a lot of sense when I'm looking at a portfolio of assets, if you will, and equate that to your own career track. So when you're talking about like the risk spectrum, let's break that down. Like, how do we do that specific audit, either in our business or in our career, to help us kind of guide us in moving forward?
Well, it's really pretty simple. It opens up some other questions, which I think are important for exploration and are sort of right in sync with what we're talking about when we reflect on 2020.
Right.
But the simplest, most risk-averse thing you can always do is basically what you've always done.
Right.
So even if you are thinking about a different career, you're going to be thinking about a new job that's been similar to your previous role, or some way that you can, maintain enough newness to be able to keep your current business or your current role relevant. But of course, that begs a few questions, right? Meaning, is what you're doing now meeting your needs in terms of your standard of living? Now, that's a relatively straightforward financial question. I know there are many experts out there that can look at all the budgeting around that. You do want to be asking yourself, how much money influences your career choices? That's one of those inner iceberg things, right? Are you being realistic about it? Are you being so anxious that you need more than you really think you do, right? And that's keeping you from taking a meaningful risk on your own behalf. But I think the really important thing is, and we've been talking about, are you living your life according to your authentic priorities? Is what you're doing now actually having the right impact on your quality of life? One thing I've always stood for as a coach is I want people to get ahead. I want their life to be joyous and abundant. But Mary, I also want them to have the time they need and deserve to truly enjoy their personal lives as well. There needs to be some balance there. And I understand that they're very competitive people who are just sort of working around the clock, and they're great with that. But they're going to need a private life as well. We all need some balance in that. So I say, is it enhancing your standard of being? As well as your standard of living. That's sort of the thing you need to think about when you're looking at the let's not change any more than we have to option, right?
Yeah. And to take what you've just said and kind of break it into a very real life example. I know we have quite a few people who listen to this podcast from the events industry. So let's just take exactly what you said and put it into a situation. So a wedding planner who's used to producing, say, 10, 15, 20, maybe even 30 weddings a year, all of a sudden weddings are not allowed in a lot of states and countries, large group gatherings. So she pivoted to producing micro weddings, 10-person events in their backyard, yada, yada, yada. But then I think also the challenge, it is innovative, but the challenge is, will a micro wedding have the same budget and take-home profitability as maybe a 300-person wedding that she is used to producing? And I think that it creates its own set of challenges and problems to work through. And that's where the cleverness comes ahead of saying, okay, looking at the year ahead, do I still want to go after sort of these micro wedding markets, knowing I need to produce 50 of them to get the same profitability? But then is that decision in alignment with your core values? Does that mean you're working 80 hours a week to produce the same amount of profit?
Well, and this question is such a great one, Mary, because it starts to take us, and I think a whole lot of us find ourselves taking this ride whether we want to or not. It sort of takes us from what we've always done into what I would call scenario 2 on this, is pursuing sort of a related but different job in the industry where you've worked previously. So that would be the next risky thing out. And,
right.
This has just cascaded upon us in a lot of ways. And again, you've got to ask yourself, is this financially viable? Right. Do you have the contacts to be able to network effectively to do something that is in the same industry, but it's a little bit different? And I think for a lot of business owners and people in this environment, we really have to bear in mind, and this isn't just happy talk on my point at this point, because we do have vaccines. We are going to open up again.
Yeah.
I understand that it's daunting. There's still real dangers there, rushing out too quickly. But a lot of people have had to maintain their relevance, maintain their relationships, and do ancillary things that don't seem as profitable right now, but it keeps them viable.
Right.
So you can still have those, those mini weddings. You can still have those group chats with people who are wedding planning. The good news about weddings is that it takes a while and it takes a lot of planning. This is why we need terrific, creative, organized professionals to help us with it. Right.
Yeah.
But we do have to look at within the reality that hopefully in a few months we'll loosen up a little of this sort of virtual situation. What can be done?
Yeah.
How do we keep this safe? And what dimension, what aspect of wedding planning lends itself most, right, to being able to operate with people remotely, even if it's going in and offering to have open conversations with brides or with families about what their concerns are and what their considerations are as we go into this period. Because I do believe we're a fiscal quarter away from being back to a more normal situation, right?
Absolutely. And so, yes, to your point there, sort of ancillary, using your bag of tricks, if you will, your portfolio of assets, could you do some work on the side that's maybe contract work for project management in corporations? Because you're utilizing those skills, those strengths that come so naturally to you. In the meantime, could you, instead of those clients going to a micro-size wedding, could you use your time as a consultant at a higher hourly rate to help them plan it, but then they execute the wedding, so it's not so labor intensive at the end? Could you, work with your clients that definitely want that bigger wedding and, help them with the project management of it through to a 2022 event date instead of, next year? So I think that's what I'm hearing is just really, it's not a black and white, this or that kind of decision. Sometimes it's looking at the different options and then choosing wisely, right?
Absolutely. And then if we take that, that idea that we're talking about, which is this internal creativity, and you can see how much you need to give yourself a break and find that strategic time to be creative, right? If we take it even farther out on the risk spectrum and look at something even a little different from that, right? Then we're looking at somebody who might have been a wedding planner in the past, right? But we're talking about a riskier position where you're looking at a job that allows you to draw on or perhaps even market to contacts from your former industry, but it's something different.
Right. Yes.
So you're a wedding planner, you're an event planner. Let's take the 20,000 foot view. Okay. So, now if we were going to sort of in between those things, can you have the virtual wedding with the green screen in the background and create that whole thing as a movie for people? Maybe. Or are you really good at creating events? And so now do you take the next step? What events are going to open up? This could actually broaden a business portfolio, right? This could be kind of interesting. So maybe you're not just doing weddings now.
That's right. Yeah.
Maybe you're doing showers. Maybe you're doing all sorts of different things that come from that, right? Maybe you're doing baby showers. Maybe you're doing reunion events with people. Maybe you're doing business celebrations. I'm not sure. Are you drawing from your same network? But you really do want to look at those transitive skills. And as hard as this period has been for business owners, and as tough as I've heard many really talented women be on themselves in this period, I think it's not just your Rolodex. It's not just your book of business and the projects you've done before. I think it's time to take a really fresh look at what some of your core attributes and skills are too, even as a wedding planner, an event planner, or any kind of business you're running.
Yeah.
Are you a natural mediator? Are you a good strategic listener? Are you great at giving directions and getting people to work in formation to get, a process going? Are you a terrific problem solver? I mean, what is it? Because when you start moving out on that part of the risk spectrum, you get to not just, what are my priorities? What do I love? But what do I innately have a gift for?
Yeah.
What do people need?
Yeah.
Right? I bring in terms of value.
And I think sometimes it's hard for us to create that list for ourselves. It feels a little self-aggrandizing. And I would just encourage you, if you're listening to this right now, press pause, go to your Facebook page, your personal page, and just simply put something out that says, hey, what do you think I'm really good at? And just ask your friends first, because you might be quite surprised the things that you could just do intuitively and naturally and don't even think about it, that you forget is such a tool in your portfolio of assets, right?
Oh, it's such an aha moment. And then that brings us all the way to the far end of the risk spectrum, which your friends on Facebook may take you to, which is when you go, I have nothing to lose. Okay. I am now going to strike out and I'm going to become a painter or a sculptor or write the great American novel, or I'm going to do that thing I've always wanted to do. Right. And I think if you feel you have nothing to lose and you've got some skills there, I always encourage that kind of thing with one caveat. And this is why what you're saying, Mary, about reach out to people who know you on Facebook is so valuable. You want to make sure that your energy is moving towards something that you've had a lifetime proclivity for doing.
Yes.
Let's say you want to be a writer, and as somebody who's just written a book, right? It takes a lot of discipline, okay? So if you want to do that, let's make sure that you have kept diaries your whole life. I know I have. You have written a whole bunch of books that might not have been published. Did you write for your high school yearbook? Do you write? In my family, if somebody wants a message and a greeting card, they're bringing it to me, right? So are you a writer? Is this just what you do, Because you always want to make sure that your energy is moving towards something that you're genuinely passionate about embracing. And you're not using it as some new idea, as an escapist fantasy from what you don't want to think about and you don't want to get away from.
Yes.
Because every step of that risk spectrum and everything we're thinking about when we look back on 2020 is every difficulty we have has got a lesson embedded in it. And if we don't try to embrace that lesson, it's just going to stay out there. Mm-hmm. We're going to recreate it. in a new business, in a new position, in an existing company, in our industry, anywhere we are, if we don't embrace what we've needed to learn the most, and many of these lessons are relational, then we're going to recreate them in 2021 as well.
So what I hear in that is that if you're really considering a major career change or pivoting to something way outside of what you're doing currently, it's fine as long as your energy is elevated to this new thing, with this new thing, rather than sort of fleeing and escaping a bad situation, because that work is still going to follow you. That inner work is going to follow you, right?
Sometimes the situations, and I think when we look back on 2020, many of these situations are just legitimately daunting.
Yeah.
I am right there thanking everyone who has had anything to do with healthcare or first responders. Thank you.
Yeah.
How these people are continuing to show up is just something that is so inspiring to me, and it takes my breath away. But at the same time, all of us, right, need to think about what these lessons are. And I love that suggestion, Mary, about going onto Facebook, because one of the things I talk about in Lifeboat, because this is about learning to be authentic and true to ourselves when we have been so conditioned and scripted, right, to be who other people expect us to be, want us to be, sometimes demand that we be, right? Yeah. How do we stay true to ourselves under pressure? And I talk a lot about what I call Lifeboat feedback. And, you get feedback on Facebook. You get formal feedback in big organizations. People who run their own firms probably are giving all sorts of feedback to their employees all the time. But when I talk about Lifeboat feedback, I mean the importance of finding other people in your life and nurturing relationships with people who will be emotionally honest with you, compassionate, patient, but listen to challenges you're facing and resist the temptation to give you tactical advice about what to do. Resist the temptation to tell you what to do, and listen purely for whether or not they hear you being true to yourself and true to your own decision-making process. So let's say you're thinking about your business or a job or something. You want feedback from people that you can ask them questions like, do I sound like I'm being emotionally honest when I describe this to you? Or are there some feelings I may be bearing or I can't admit? These can be questions like, should I hire this person? Should I wait for a while? Do we have the money for it? Should I pivot my business? But as we've said from the beginning, it's about your decision-making process, right? You want to be able to ask someone questions like, do you think I'm being clear with myself about my motives?
Yeah.
And if not, why not? We talked about money in this thing, and I know there are a lot of experts that are talking about money, but is a scarcity mentality causing you to think that you need more money than you do? Is this the time you spend it? Is this the time you invest? Because we are going to move through this thing and go forward, right? And you do want to be able to take not reckless moves, but meaningful risks on your own behalf, right?
Yes,
and then
calculated risks, right?
Calculated risks, right? And then tough people we're dealing with. If you've got a boss that you just can't seem to please, or someone you've hired that's not integrating with the rest of the team, when we talk about, these lessons, right, you want someone that you can ask, do you think my assessment of this difficult person is objective? Is it fair? Or if it's not, what am I missing? And you may have someone who knows you well enough to go, well, they're just like your brother, right?
Do you know? Yeah. Funny enough, as you're speaking about this, it made me think about a classic movie that came out only a few years ago, Boss Baby, of course. Where, of course, the boss baby has, the three yes men who just say, yes, oh, that's a great idea. Yes, we should totally do that. Yes. And then you've got, the baby that's the right-hand woman that's helping you along the way. And then there's the other guy eating all the cookies. But, I mean, that's the truth. Like, who you surround yourself with is incredibly important. And yes, I have had some down days in this year, and it's certainly helpful to have those people that boost you up and tell you what you want to hear and validate your feelings and all the things. But I think the key thing of what you said there was also finding those people who are going to have those deep open and honest conversations with you, and start to point out, well, hey, have you thought about this, or maybe this blind spot that you're not seeing in the enthusiasm of building this new business or taking this huge pivot. Not that they're a cynical voice, but just an honest voice, right?
Oh, I think that's so important, Mary. I think one of the central things in Lifeboat is we talk about the difference between what I call this big ship mindset, right? Where, you've got a role, you're playing it, everybody's on this big ship. And we talk about what these Titanic survivors went through when they went from that ship that was seen in the press as unsinkable at the time, didn't turn out to be true. And then suddenly they're huddled in these little lifeboats and everything has changed.
Yeah.
And one of the things we talk about when we compare what happened on the Titanic to what's going on in our lives is there's some things you really need other human beings for. No joke. You cannot physically row a lifeboat without other human beings. And you also can't see things that you have been conditioned to not want to know about yourself without the help of other human beings. And I think one of the most important investments we can make is in nurturing relationships with people who will really just help us keep our own humanity agile and flourishing as we go through this. Because crises are not times to focus primarily on transactional relationships.
Yeah.
Crises are times when we come together, right, at a human level. And we figure out how we are going to get through this together. I talk all the time about making the shift from the self-help mindset to the us-help mindset. And as we're going through our days and all that scheduling and all those webinars and all those demands, it really helps us to, I try on my little list to make a discipline of reaching out to people that I just like, or I've known in the past, or I care about, and making sure, even if it's only 20 minutes a day, that I build into my schedule the ability to have conversations with people that are not transactional.
Right. Not surface level.
Not purely commercially focused. Right. I think like all of us, I have friends I've done business with, but I don't do business with them because I'm friends. We just happen to like each other and we're doing business, right?
Yeah.
But I also have those moments with people when I want to hear how they're doing. And it has absolutely nothing to do commercially, but what it does do for all of us as professionals is it keeps us present. It helps us listen not only to the other person, but to ourselves. Because I think in these important dialogues with people who aren't judging, who aren't one-upping by offering unsolicited advice. But we know that there's somebody we're going to talk to and we can really just get real about how we feel. Like I shouldn't have been intimidated by that, but I was. Or I wish I hadn't popped off. I try not to do that, but it got the better of me. You can't believe what happened before that meeting, We can really get real about moments like that. That is what helps us center enough to make really strategic, objective decisions and work with tools like that risk spectrum really, really skillfully because we're in it. We're actually answering the questions authentically. We're not just rushing through one more planning exercise from the perspective of a false self.
Yeah, and powering through the hard times. And there is times where certainly you have to put your nose down and do the work for sure. But what I also hear in that, that I think is really critical and has been the huge lesson learned for 2020 for myself, is how critically important your network and your community really is, not only in your business, but in your life and in the richness of your life. And so taking that time to deepen relationships with people who you may only have a surface level relationship with. We do a couple of orders every year with this person and that's it. I think that jumping off the hamster wheel, taking the time to deepen those relationships makes for a better life. That's what I'm hearing in what you're saying as well.
I will say that, and I also I don't want to press it too hard with your listeners because I try to keep things no drama. But in easier times, and it has been quite a year, right? In easier times, we would be able to say, Mary, doing that kind of thing just sort of makes you a better person, doesn't it? And everybody would be listening and nodding their head because we all know that. And then we'd rush right back on the hamster wheel, okay? And, it would kind of be there in the back of our minds. And maybe once or twice a year, we'd have a nice conversation, but really, who has time for it? Because you just see my inbox, right? And honestly, I think this is a survival skill. I think if there's one thing we've learned in 2020, it's that maintaining our humanity and nurturing ourselves is a personal responsibility that we cannot shirk. It's amazing how many mothers and parents, right, are like, oh my gosh, my kids have to socialize. I have to have an opportunity. My kids need to have fun. They need to socialize. And I'm like, what about you?
Yeah.
You need to have fun too. That's about as important as oxygen and food, and you can see it with your kids. But where are you? You need to have people that will listen to you. We might not need to climb the jungle gym the way our kids do, but if you do, go for it, right? But I mean, we need that as well. So we have to remember that to take care of our families, our businesses, our kids. What was that saying they always used to have? Put the oxygen mask on yourself on a plane.
For sure.
Before
First.
you try putting it on somebody else.
Yeah.
It's time to remember that this isn't just a nice to have. This is critical. And when big businesses are, facing cost pressures and downsizing, I think they sometimes make a mistake to minimize some of the supportive things we really need to stop and do to make sure that we're creating a culture where everybody feels supported and is connecting at a human level. That can go by the wayside when there's, too many, it seems like never-ending emergencies. But it's never been more critical. When you're running your own business and you're looking out for yourself or your team or your department, this is the time to prioritize that stuff. It's not just a nice thing.
Yeah.
It's a vital thing.
It's important entirely. And, we did speak to a gentleman, Mark Butler, a couple of weeks ago on, how to plan and budget for your business for the year ahead. So make sure to go back and listen to that one if you really want step-by-step how to kind of map out the next 12 months ahead. But I think all of this plays into your strategic plan for the year ahead. Otherwise, and it is as simple as mapping out each month what are the initiatives that I want to go after, what is it that our clients or customers need the most from us, and really taking that time to assess and go back to the team and really get clear on what is our focus this month, what is it that we are delivering on, where can we serve the most. But then to your point, I think equally thinking about what you need each of those months. What do you as a leader need to serve yourself in order to not only just survive? Because I think a lot of months, maybe quite a few, a lot of people are just like, I'm just trying to get by. I'm just trying to survive and stabilize and all the things. We've done that, right? We've done that for an extended period of time. I dare say and challenge a lot of us, and myself included, is not just survive, not just stabilize, but actually thrive. And, really, how can you take this time where things are a little bit slower until they start ramping up again in January to, put those initiatives and be proactive and put those in place now, month by month, quarter by quarter?
I think that's so beautifully said, Mary, because I know a lot of people who are thriving in the midst of this uncertainty.
Yeah.
And the things that have caused them to thrive have been deceptively simple. And one of the many things that I always encourage people to do, I don't know if I mentioned it the last time we spoke, but just in case, it still remains good, is even in the course of your workday, if you're running a business or you have a senior executive responsibility at a business, take 10, 15, 20 minutes and discipline yourself to move at half your normal pace. Slow down. Even if you have to put it on your phone or you put a little chime in and then you wait for it to come back, discipline yourself to move at half your normal pace, because that will force you into the present moment. It's almost meditative, right? Yeah. And when we're in crisis, it's like anti-meditative, right? But it's almost meditative, and you will be in the felt sense of your business. you will notice things, even though we may be working remotely. You will realize things and notice things that wouldn't occur to you otherwise, because it's not just the internal recurrent chatter. It's the pace of that stuff that gets us, right? And so I've had so many clients call me up and say, I cannot believe what I found myself thinking today.
Yeah.
Let me tell on myself with this one. And if I hadn't slowed down, I never would have realized how pessimistic, how cynical, how judgmental, and these things aren't all bad, you know, but it's the conversations we're having with ourselves that are so critical to the success of our businesses.
Yep.
The strength of our relationships personally and professionally, but as you're saying, Mary, just the overall quality of our lives and our ability, in changing circumstances to still be happy. Right.
So then here's the kicker, and this is the true question. Your book is based around the Titanic and, all the things that happen in the Titanic and the lessons learned kind of in a business lens with that. So how do we, as survivors of the 2020 Titanic, going into 2021, how do we plan without being so risk averse, or absolutely freezing in place? Because let's face it, did many of the people who were on the Titanic and survive go on another cruise ship? Like how do we know that, oh God, this thing happened and that was horrible, knowing we're going into another year? How do we do it with some sense of hope without just being like, ugh, I'm going to avoid all risk altogether?
I think it's been, in many ways, it's just been absolutely tragic, and that's that. But there's also been the gift of some really important lessons, and it always brings me back to a centering question. It's something that occurred to the survivors of the Titanic, and it plays out after they got rescued by the Carpathia.
Yeah.
And it plays out in our minds today when we look back on a year like 2020, and you say, how did going through this change me? What did I lack that I wanted to see more of? I think for a lot of people it's things like kindness, integrity, truth, compassion, consistency, right? An actual sense of excellence, a sense of duty to others. I talk a lot about making the shift from self-help to us-help. And I think that's so important. You cannot have everyone feeling alone together and everyone just looking out for their own personal gain. You get much more abundance, and you break those habits of thinking small and acting small and feeling small, right? When you make that shift from self-help to us-help, and you realize, you go into a situation not weighted down by anxiety about how, what's in it for me. But you go in with fresh eyes saying, okay, here's those innate strengths I've got. We talked about that earlier. What are those, Yeah. Here's how I come into a situation and I help make it better.
Yeah.
What am I seeing? Who am I listening to? What do they think they need? What do I think they need?
Yeah.
How do we pull those things together in a way that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, right?
Yeah, and I certainly appreciate that. And I imagine that if I was a survivor on the Titanic and I was going on another cruise ship, I think I would go on, there would be a sense of trepidation. I'm not going to lie, right? A fear of, what if it happens again, exactly the same. But I imagine I would also go on a bit more grounded. I'd go, okay, there's where the lifeboats are. There's where my cabin is. You just have a little bit more sense and awareness. I talk a lot with my clients. It's like you're a Girl Scout and you've got new badges that you've added to your sash, right? Every single blip and blunder and, horrible situation and also triumph is a lesson learned, and that is a hard-earned badge on your Girl Scout sash. And that's okay. That's actually richening your life and your business.
Well, and I think one of the things when I look back on 2020 that I've learned is it just reinforces this concept that one size does not fit all.
Yes.
People can look at the same thing from extremely different perspectives. That's something that we're going to be taking with us as a lesson into 2021, even if we're all vaccinated and COVID goes away.
Right.
We've learned that you can have people that you love and respect and think you know, right, how they feel. And you can suddenly realize that they have a starkly different life story or set of expectations or reactions to something than you do.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important for leaders and people running teams and businesses to bear in mind. The reasons that people follow you or want to join your organization aren't all going to be the same.
That's right.
They're going to differ. The reasons that people feel motivated by you or motivated by what you're all doing together, that's not one size fits all either, right? What creates a sense of loyalty and belonging in your culture, different things for different people. And so that brings us all back to trying to be present and listen and really observant with others. And the trick to that, Mary, I really believe this, is the ability to be present and notice what's going on with other people in the moment stems from our ability to be connected with ourselves, that inner alignment. If I can't listen to me, I can't listen to you.
Yeah.
Because whenever someone else is talking, right, you've got that internal dialogue. And if I'm not comfortable myself with that alignment, what I'm saying to myself may drown out what you're trying to tell me.
Absolutely.
I may not be able to take it in.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I so am grateful for this conversation. I really hope that wherever you are in the world and you're listening to this now, do take some time this week before you get back into the hustle and bustle, before the kids go back to school, either in person or online. Take this time and really sit down and journal it out or mind map it out or get a giant whiteboard and just start writing down some of these key prompts that Maggie shared of what am I spending my most time on? What is my core values, both personally and professionally, and where do I want to head next year? How do I want to feel? And so I encourage you to, if you've not read it already, go out and check out Maggie's book, Lifeboat, Navigating Unexpected Career Change and Disruption. The links are in the show notes at thesimplifierspodcast.com, so you can find out more there. And it's a wonderful little book to read, especially if you are a history buff and you like learning about things like that as well. So, Maggie, a few questions as we wrap up. And again, thank you so much for your wisdom and your time. I really, really appreciate it. I hope it is inspiring for so many out there that are listening and kind of doing that strategic planning right now. So, one question is, and we asked this previously, so tell us what's one book or blog you're reading right now, actually, that's either inspiring you or poking holes and challenging your belief system.
I'm reading Living Beautifully with Uncertainty by Pema Chodron.
Ooh, good one.
It's a marvelous book, and I'm actually doing it two ways. And you can do this with Lifeboat as well, but that book is available on Audible and in the hard copy form. And so sometimes when I have a few minutes, I will actually read it where I can underline and take a few notes. And then sometimes when I'm going outside to try to get that like little 20-minute power walk in, I will listen to it because her voice is so interesting as well. So, so I'm sort of taking that in the nuggets that I can, but it keeps me really centered on gratitude. It's a lovely book.
Huge. I love her work. She is such a powerful writer. And you're absolutely right. Gratitude is a huge element, I think, to grounding. And it just opens up whole new parts, neural pathways in your brain and in your heart, so that sparks inspiration. So tell me, who's one person in your network you just feel is really up to brilliant things right now that we could shine a spotlight on them? And who knows, maybe we'll have them on the podcast one day.
Well, there's a gal who's written a book called Unapologetically Ambitious. And her name is Shelley Ambashow. And I think that it's a really great book for people who are trying to move beyond any self-limiting beliefs and sort of, reach their full stride in their career. So I think that would be an excellent person to have a conversation with.
Brilliant. Well, we will definitely link up with her. So back to gratitude. Tell me, what's one thing you're grateful for today?
I am grateful for my marriage. Yesterday was my 7-year anniversary with my husband, and I was upstairs working away. And when I came downstairs, we cannot go to a restaurant, the restaurant we go to every single year to celebrate our anniversary because of COVID. And he had recreated the meal for me.
Oh.
And had music and candles and flowers. Absolutely one of the most romantic things I've ever seen in my life. Totally unexpected. So I'm grateful for my husband, for our family, and, for the health of our loved ones.
Shout out to the good men in the world.
Absolutely.
We need more of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you want to get connected with Maggie, her website is workplacerelationships.com. I'll also put a link to her LinkedIn in our show notes so you guys can get connected there and, reach out to Maggie. She is a wealth of knowledge, and especially if you are in senior management roles in a larger organization, as an executive coach, I can highly recommend her work as well. So my final question for you today is this, Maggie. And again, thank you so much for your time today. Someone somewhere is that shining example of holding on by a thread. we're coasting, like skidding into the runway of 2020, and she is feeling rough and ragged, but also a little bit inspired after today's conversation. What is one thing you could whisper into her ear right now just to encourage her in this moment?
It's going to be okay. We're going to make it. We're going to get through this. If you are sitting here listening to this podcast right now, that thread is going to save you. You take some of these ideas, you keep listening to these things, and you put them into action, and they will work. I know, Mary, one of the reasons that people do what you and I do is that we've overcome difficulties ourselves, and we want other people to realize that that's possible. I know that my own career has been through overcoming many of my own personal obstacles, and maybe sometimes because of them. I'm not sure. Yeah. Maybe sometimes the way I've made them work out. But we've all been through periods where we were living paycheck to paycheck. We weren't sure how it was going to happen. We were scared. We were dealing with difficult people. You keep taking the ideas that resonate with you and put them into practice. And one last thing for everybody out there. I think one of the most powerful things we can do right now in the moment is look around for an opportunity to do something positive for other people without stopping to calculate what's in it for us. Stop. Let someone who looks like harassed go ahead of you in the grocery line. Yeah. Give somebody that parking spot, right? Just step back, understand when somebody seems like out of sorts, and instead of picking a fight, be gracious, be kind, and don't overthink it because the moment will elude you if you do. Fork over your coupon, help somebody out, because that reminds us, even through what we notice, that we're all valuable. Yeah. We're all here for a reason, and you never know when the little things are going to be the big things in somebody's day.
And that grace, that's a superpower. And hopefully that will spark and ripple out to others around the world.
Absolutely.
Big love to you, Maggie. Thank you so much for your time today.
Back to you. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this, Mary.